Hello, and thank you so much for checking out my presentation on tribal colleges and universities as part of my institutional type analysis project for Higher Ed 5520. So a brief overview of what we'll be covering today. First, we'll get started by talking about why I selected this topic of tribal colleges and universities as my assignment. We'll dive into some historical background on TCUs. We'll review a framework analysis of how TCUs fit into the higher education landscape. We'll discuss two key issues that emerged through my literature review, including funding and supports that TCUs face. And finally, references will be reviewed at the end. So an overview of why I selected TCUs as part of this class assignment. Personally, I had limited knowledge on tribal colleges and universities prior to the course, and I always wanted to learn more. So this assignment was a perfect opportunity for me to do just that. And I've seen several mentions of tribal colleges and universities in the media as part of our class assignments in here as we're doing some internet research. So I wanted to learn more, and that really piqued my interest. Additionally, I am from the state of Minnesota, and Minnesota is home to several tribal college universities and Native American tribes and land. So I really wanted to use that as an opportunity for me to make some connections back to where I'm originally from. Additionally, I've lived and taught near a couple of reservations, and while I haven't visited any tribes or tribal colleges universities, I found this would be a great opportunity for me to learn more about them. Additionally, while many other types of colleges, universities, and institutions face key inequities or barriers, I have heard a lot of challenges faced specifically by TCUs. So I wanted to learn more about those inequities so that as a future employee in higher education, I could learn a little bit more about how to work towards addressing those inequities and barriers. Some historical background and context on tribal colleges and universities. Navajo Community College was established in 1968, and this was the first TCU in the United States of America. The college was established on Navajo Nation tribal land, and it is now called Diné College. Shortly after the establishment of the college in 1968, just 4 years later in 1972, the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, or AIHEC, was established. And this group essentially was designed to uh, pool resources and raise awareness and advocacy for TCUs as they began to expand across the United States. The overall purpose and function of TCUs is to honor the tribal traditions and language of the Native students, while also equipping all students that attend with the key skills to be successful in life and any careers they choose to pursue. A lot of these colleges hone in on technical skills such as welding, because they value those skills within their lands and also within key careers that are in high demand within the United States. Over the years, we've seen a lot of changes and challenges with this specific institution type. Between the years 2000 and 2010, for example, the Native population increased by approximately 39%. And despite this huge boom, enrollment plateaued. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but one of the key issues faced by tribal colleges and universities is funding. And this is because states are not required to provide funding for the college universities. So tuition is one of the main income sources along with federal funding. So if enrollment is plateauing and not keeping up with the Native population increases, that can pose to be a threat or a barrier as a whole to the institution type. As of now, there are approximately 37 tribal colleges and universities and 28,000 students that call those college universities home. How TCUs fit into the higher education landscape. The key mission of TCUs is to have heightened focus on technical skills while again honoring and preserving the tribal identity, as mentioned by Gassman and colleagues in 2017. Additionally, they really focus on honing in on key STEM skills. So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. So again, providing opportunities for carpentry, woodworking, welding, hospitality, some key industry skills that are needed and can be used right within those territories or lands that the students live on, and also in general. Most of the 37 TCUs are considered to be two-year institutions, and only 7 of them are four-year institutions, as found by DeLong and colleagues. Martin also conducted some research to understand the unique institutional demographics that are present within tribal colleges and universities. The average student attending is approximately 28 years old, and 64% of students are female, while 36% are male. And of these students, many of them are single parents. meaning that they're having to work and take care of children and do school and manage all of those at the same time single-handedly. Additionally, there has been a lot of open enrollment of non-native students within the universities, and in the next slide, we'll kind of see a breakdown of that. Of all the colleges and universities, it is the most underfunded institutional type, as found by Gassman and colleagues. And this is because, as mentioned previously, funding is not mandated by states, and a lot of the funding that colleges receive in this institution type are either from the tuition paid for by the students or from federal funding. But these universities attempt to keep tuition low because, as mentioned, or if you recall, these students are a lot of times single parents and are working jobs and are having to care for their child or children and also themselves. So they keep tuition low as an opportunity to alleviate the access barrier. So on this slide, we see the composition of the different institutions. As you can see, there is a high trend of non-native enrollment in some of the tribal colleges and universities. Some of upwards of close to 50% of the students are non-native, while others, the DNA College, the original one that we had mentioned in the beginning, has the lowest with only about 2% of non-native enrollment students in the institution. So two of the key issues that we're going to focus on are funding and supports that are provided to these tribal colleges and universities, and we'll start with funding. So again, federal funding through tribally controlled colleges and universities Assistance Act of 1978 was developed and was essentially a formula that was used to allocate funding for Native students that are attending a TCU. However, there is zero funding that is made available for non-native students that are attending the TCU. So as we go back to that last slide, as you can see, if there is a high percent of non-native enrollment within a college or university, this can pose to definitely be a significant barrier because they're not receiving that federal funding for those students that are attending since they're non-native. There is no obligation for states or local funding appropriations, unlike other institutional types that you may see as part of the course. This was found by Nelson and Fry. So the key significance of this funding issue is that there is a lack of resources and student educational opportunities, and this really presents an equity gap not only for institutions, but also for students that wish to attend these institutions. And of course, this is going to impact the attendance and the enrollment of the colleges and universities. This diagram right here from Nelson and Fry does a nice job outlining the different appropriations that we see in tribal colleges and universities in 2-year versus 4-year, along with their non-TCU counterparts. As we can see here, the green diagrams or the green portions of the bar charts indicate the percent of revenue that comes in that is federal appropriations, grants, or contracts. As you can see, the TCUs are significantly funded by federal appropriations. I'd like to draw your attention now to the blue portion of the bar graph, which is the state appropriations, grants, and contracts. And as you can see here, this blue bar between the TCUs for 2 and 4-year are very small compared to the TCUs, the non-TCU counterparts that we see for 2 and 4-year colleges, where they receive upwards of almost a third of their revenue sources from the state level. So because they're not accessing or not able to have those state appropriations, grants, or contracts as much, there's no obligation for individual states to do that. That really hurts the funding levels of our tribal colleges and universities. We can also see with the red portion of the bar chart, that non-TCU institutions receive a significant amount of funding from the tuition that is paid for by the students that are attending because they tend to charge a little bit more and they have higher enrollment trends. But for tribal colleges and universities, that isn't the case because they're trying to keep the tuition levels as low as possible to make it possible for students who are struggling or having to raise children and have jobs in addition to being a part or full-time student, the opportunity to still access a higher education. So when we look at some strategies to address these issues, we could advocate for increased funding from local or state government, and this could take form of advocacy campaigns, meeting with legislators, and having opportunities to share the story of TCUs at a government or policy level. Or we could also increase the tuition of TCU institutions. However, again, that would widen the equity gap and could potentially harm enrollment trends in general. The second key issue that I found through this assignment was the idea of supports for students. So there's strong social and emotional supports that are offered for students and their families as part of attending a tribal college and university, and that was found by Gassman and colleagues, who also went on to discuss the fact that the lack of resources and technology to support student learning is definitely a barrier. So while a lot of these institutions focus on preparing students for science, technology, engineering, and math, and more of those technical skill areas, many classrooms or spaces lack some of the cutting edge technology that are being used in the industry today. And there's a definite need for upgrade for facilities and for equipment for students and for instructors. So the key significance of this, Pavel and colleagues describe the desire for education to respond to the community needs of today and tomorrow. These tribal lands definitely have needs, and they want to prepare the students on their tribal lands for careers and helping meet those needs of the local area. And it's hard to do that if you don't have the up-to-date equipment in order to carry out that goal. This equity gap makes facilitating instruction very challenging, not only for instructors, but also for the students that are attempting to learn and prepare for future careers. So again, some key strategies to address similar to the funding topic that was previously discussed. Advocacy for tribal colleges and universities, again, having students share the story of their experiences and having administrators and other stakeholders within the institution being ready to advocate for what they're trying to achieve, which again is getting more funding and additional supports for learners, whether that includes equipment or facilities. Having that advocacy and having that voice can definitely be a great first step. Additionally, having partnerships with high schools or other institutions is something that a lot of tribal colleges and universities have already begun to investigate, as described by Gassman and colleagues in 2017. Some of these partnerships may look like having a local high school or another institution that may or may not be a tribal college or university, pooling or sharing or collaborating on different resources to help leverage the skills and opportunities for students at both institutions. So, for instance, perhaps having a welding program at a local high school, borrowing or having some type of shared agreement between the college or university and the high school to allow for the use of facilities or equipment, assuming that there's some type of worked out agreement with funding or resource or equipment management. So that is something that was described in the article, and I found that to be fascinating and something that could potentially be a workable solution for some institutions that are struggling to fund or identify the supports that are needed in order to have quality experiences for instructors and students. So the references can be found here on the screen. And in conclusion, I just want to say how much I appreciated this class activity. As mentioned previously, I did not have a lot of prior experience with tribal colleges and universities. And although I had heard of them and I've even lived near them, I really enjoyed having the opportunity to learn more about them as part of this assignment. I have a lot of experience with land grants and research institutions, and they are very different from tribal colleges and universities. And while they are different in how they're funded and organized and managed, the common goal here is education. And I think no matter what institutional type that we find ourselves in, if we stay true to that mission of educating and preparing students for future careers, no matter what that may be, we will find a lot of commonalities between these systems. And as we work together to further advance education within the United States, I think it's important that we collaborate, pool resources, and have a positive outlook so that we can work for the betterment of society. So again, thank you very much for listening to my presentation and have a great rest of your day.